It's a pleasure to be a part of this event, and I thank Cafe Mutual, for inviting me to this event. I also would like to compliment the organizers for hosting a conference specifically on passives. I believe it's the fourth edition, so I think that's very encouraging because it gives us a chance to think and reflect on certain and this very important segment of the market. And I just entered and I was listening to some debate on the when the panel was having, and I particularly liked when one of the speakers said it is not passive versus active, and sometimes one tends to mix up, see it in that perspective, in some sense of adversarial position. It is passive and active. So that's where we as a regulator also, would like to see it in that perspective, then any sense of, one versus the other. So in my remarks today, I would like to focus on three broad aspects. And also, I'm sort of mindful. I believe we have a very learned audience here, and I'm not sure how much new, what value add I will do to your knowledge. But nonetheless, I've been told to speak on regulatory perspective. So from that angle, I'll put my remarks in three parts. First, of course, is some data and the trends. I mean, just a context setting where this industry is coming from and where it is headed, the passives. Secondly, the dynamic between active and passive and not active versus passive. And thirdly, I would also like to talk about some of the key enablers from SEBI side, which are more focused on the development of passive segment. So let me straight away jump to the first part, the key trends. So as many of you would know, the roots of passive investing go back to the 1970s when John Bogle founded Vanguard and launched the first index mutual fund. At that time, the concept was ridiculed in some sense, and critics dubbed it as Bogle's folly. Fast forward 50 years, and that folly now manages trillions of dollars. In the US, passive funds surpassed active funds in assets under management in 2023, according to data published by ICI, this investment company institute based in Washington, D.C. As on April 30, 2025, which is very recent, over 58% of US equity fund assets are now in passive strategies. Let's talk about the trends in India. While India's passive investing journey began in the early 2000s, passive funds have gained more traction, as many of you would know, in the last 5 years. So some data points, the share of passive funds, and it includes both index funds and ETFs, has increased from 6.5% to over 17% in the past 5 years. The AUM of passive schemes as on March 31, 2025 was over 11 lakh crores, INR 11 trillion. Within the passive fund ecosystem, ETFs account for 75% of the AUM, and a significant portion of the growth in ETFs has been driven by investments made by the EPFO. In the past couple of years, both ETFs and index funds have grown at a CAGR of over 28%. The number of passive schemes have also grown. As on March end 2025, investors had around 561 passive schemes to choose from, which is a four-fold increase from 119 in 2020. The number of retail folios in passive funds have risen approximately by 35% from 30 odd million to 40 million in the same period. Individual investors both retail and HNIs now account for 26% of the total AUM in passive funds, up from just 13% 5 years ago. So obviously the question is, I mean, these are all very healthy trends from the growth perspective in the passive segment. So what explains this increasing shift to passive investing? One very clear, no-brainer answer is low cost. The cost of passive investing is much lower than the active funds. Price wars and competition in the ETF space has further put downward pressure on fund fee across the globe. In the US, competition has driven fees to zero in case of a handful of index funds and ETFs. In India, the average TER charge for index funds and ETFs is well below the regulatory limits. As the industry grows and competition intensifies, I believe the pressure on fees is only going to increase, and which is a welcome trend for investors, and one that will push all asset managers, irrespective whether you're doing passive or active, to be more efficient. In addition to low cost, another driver of the passive investing movement seems to be underperformance of active schemes. As per data published by S&P, in the US, 85% of large cap funds underperformed the S&P 500 in a 3-year period. Over a 15-year period, this number increased to 90%. Similar trends are seen in various other global markets. Let's look at the India position on the performance side. So in India, for a 3-year return period, as recent as February 28, 2025, in case of direct plans, 43% of total schemes by number, comprising 29% of total direct plan AUM, underperform the benchmark. And it translates into a huge number in absolute terms. For regular plans, the number increases to 67% of total schemes by number, comprising 49% of regular plan AUM. Obviously, regular plan has a higher component of charges and fees. So there, the underperformance becomes even sharper. Let me now turn to the second part of my remarks in terms of the dynamic, as I said, between active and passive approaches. The premise of active management is attractive, that with skill, insight, and timing, one can beat the market. And no doubt, there are funds which have done so. But as the data shows, finding these funds before they outperform is a challenge. On the other hand, if you look at the roots of passive investing, they go back to the what is called as EMH, the efficient market hypothesis. The idea that market prices reflect all known information, making it nearly impossible to consistently beat the market. And this EMH keeps coming back both in the academic and the practitioner circle. It is a very good debate that we have all the time. And if you, another related idea again coming from the research done in US is the wisdom of crowds. What is wisdom of crowds? Which was actually illustrated by Sir Francis Galton. He actually ran a competition, and the competition was a guessing contest. So people were asked to guess the weight of ox animal. So those who were participants, they were asked to guess the weight of the animal, and this was done in 1906. So no individual was able to guess the weight of the ox correctly. But the median guess of 787 people was nearly spot on. So markets in many ways reflect that so-called wisdom of crowds or the collective intelligence. While passive investing has its advantages, and I'm sure you are all aware, concerns have been expressed with respect to its rise. Perhaps the most important concern that also from the regulatory side we see it like that is that the methodology related to index construction and modification, it should be transparent and its management should be subject to adequate governance and accountability mechanisms. There should be no conflicts of interest involved in index construction. And this piece we've tried to address, and I'll talk about it later. Additionally, so one important point which we also endorse as a regulator is the index construction and modification. Additionally, some commentators suggest that since passive investing does not take into account a company's fundamentals and does not react to new information in the market, the rise can potentially create mispricing and make markets less efficient. A related argument is that passive investing can lead to significant concentration in the largest stocks. In the US, the top 10 companies make up nearly one-third of the S&P 500 index. When a company grows, passive funds allocate more money to it regardless of its fundamentals. These are some concerns which have been expressed by, in various fora from time to time. This self-reinforcing cycle can inflate bubbles and make the index overly exposed to a handful of names. Volatility can also be intensified by the way in which money flows, both in and out of the index funds, as passive funds create buy or sell orders for all stocks in the index at the same time. All shares therefore move in the same direction, and the benefits of direct diversifications are at times reduced. Paradoxically, some argue that rise of passives may create new opportunities for active managers. Index funds are not looking for market anomalies such as underpriced stocks, which in theory should create more opportunities for active investors to find them. Moreover, in volatile or distressed markets, active managers can pivot, hedge, or exit. Passive funds by design cannot. This rigidity can be a disadvantage during extreme market conditions. To my mind, both passive and active approaches serve different investor needs and can coexist productively. As regulator, our focus is on enabling the healthy growth of the mutual fund ecosystem as a whole, active or passive, and address the risks associated with each approach. Let me now move to the third part of my address, that is the key enablers for orderly growth. And I'm sure some of you would be aware of what we've done in this space recently. So first is the recent introduction of the MF Lite regulatory framework, a more streamlined and facilitative regime for mutual funds that wish to focus exclusively on passive strategies. The new regulations are aimed at reducing compliance responsibilities for passive-only funds, fostering innovation, promoting ease of entry, and encouraging new players in the mutual fund industry. Idea is to enable, as you all know, the industry is growing very fast. More and more people are coming in. So can we open up the space for those who just want to do only passive, where we can have a light touch approach, and that is where this MF Lite framework comes from. Under the MF Lite regulations, various aspects such as eligibility norms for sponsoring a mutual fund, roles and responsibilities of trustees, governance requirements, reporting obligations, etc., have been relaxed. In December 2024, SEBI issued a circular detailing the operational aspects, including the eligible indices on which passive schemes can be launched under the MF Lite framework. To start with, only a limited set of indices have been prescribed. In order to reduce volatility and difference of returns of ETFs index funds with respect to its benchmark, limits have been placed on tracking error for other than debt funds and tracking difference And also we've mandated the disclosure of both tracking error and tracking difference. Existing mutual funds having both active and passive schemes, they have the option to hive off their passive schemes to a different group entity, thereby resulting in management of active and passive schemes by separate AMCs under a common sponsor. Of course, it comes with certain conditions. The second significant policy intervention that we've done is in the area of regulation for introduction of regulations for index providers. It's not been talked about much. It has become effective recently, and some guidance is still to be issued on the subject. But let me give you a gist of what these regulations provide. The regulations provide a framework for registration of index providers, which license significant indices, which we have defined in the regulations. And that definition is based on, it is defined on the basis of the AUM that are tracked or benchmarked by domestic mutual funds and have cumulative assets under management exceeding a specified threshold. The regulatory framework is in accordance with the ISO principles for financial benchmarks and only applicable to significant indices. Idea is not to cover each and every index. With these regulations, we aim to enhance transparency and accountability in governance and administration of financial benchmarks in the securities market. And I think this will help in the orderly growth of passive segments also. Couple of points before I conclude. So on the governance, I would like to speak a little bit about the governance, and this is not just for passives, for the entire industry as such. As you all know, the industry has grown phenomenally in the recent years, and if we have to sustain this growth story, it is essential for the mutual fund industry to uphold strong governance practices and maintain a reputation for integrity and reliability. Good governance assumes greater significance given the significant retail participation by mutual funds in mutual funds. So it's very important to note that many of these retail investors are first-time investors, and it is important to maintain their trust in markets and more specifically in mutual funds. In this context, considering some of the front-running instances in the past, we have, in collaboration with AMFI, recently mandated all AMCs to implement a structured institutional mechanism which can proactively identify and deter instances of potential market abuse, including front-running and fraudulent transactions in securities. This mechanism consists of enhanced surveillance systems, internal control procedures, escalation processes, and a whistleblower policy. Also, the idea is to have a consistent mechanisms across the industry. So what we've come out with in collaboration with both AMCs and AMFI, it is done in very close coordination with them as to what would be the contours of this system, which should be uniform across industry in the interest of level playing field. Governance of corporates is another area where mutual funds, both active and passives, can play a significant role through their engagement, both through voting and voice. SEBI has been actively encouraging mutual funds to discharge their stewardship responsibilities. Again, if I can mention, we are one of the few jurisdictions which has a very comprehensive stewardship code, which is comparable with any other developed market, which actually raises a lot of expectations from mutual funds in terms of their discharge of stewardship responsibilities. Let me talk a little bit about self-regulation. Self-regulation is another important component of good governance. There is a noticeable increase in the complexity of products launched under the passive investing label. While innovation and product choice are welcome developments in any healthy markets, it is critical that AMCs maintain discipline in product launches and ensure clear communication of index methodology and risks. The industry should ensure that the quest for AUM or incentives does not override, and this is important, maybe I should repeat this, the industry should ensure that the quest for AUM or incentives does not override the principle of suitability. The core promise of passive investing has always been its simplicity, transparency, and low cost. We must be careful not to dilute this value proposition. Investor education is another critical piece, since low cost does not necessarily equate to low risk. Low cost does not mean that there is low risk. Index funds do carry market risk, liquidity risks, and tracking errors. SEBI has therefore directed AMCs and MFI to carry out focused investor education and awareness initiatives for passive funds. Let me now conclude. Mutual funds are one of the, as we all know, and we take pride in that. In fact, wherever I get a chance to speak, especially before the global audience, I always say it's a huge success story, and if you are not there, you are missing something. The mutual funds are one of the most successful financial products that have stood the test of time and various bulls and bear cycles. I compliment the whole industry for contributing to the excellent growth of mutual funds in our country. But there is no room for complacency. Our job as regulators, asset managers, advisors, and distributors is not just to grow AUM, it is to build an ecosystem that is inclusive, resilient, robust, and ethical. And ethical, I would like to underline and say it in bold. We can have perhaps another session just on what is meant by ethical behavior in various aspects of our industry. As we move forward, it is essential that the industry remains steadfast in its commitment to the fundamental principles of governance, accountability, and transparency. By doing so, we can ensure that the benefits of mutual funds, both active and passive, continue to expand and contribute to a more financially inclusive and prosperous society. Thank you.